In August 2013, the quiet town of Bakersfield, California, was rocked by the shocking discovery of Todd Chance's lifeless body in a remote almond grove. A devoted father and husband, Todd's murder left investigators scrambling to find answers. As they dug deeper, what seemed like a straightforward case quickly turned into something far more complex. With each clue, the mystery only deepened, leaving one pressing question: who wanted Todd Chance dead, and why? Todd Chance, born on March 10, 1968, to Diana and Travis Chance, grew up on a farm in the small town of Shafter, near Bakersfield. Alongside his younger brother Scott, Todd learned the value of hard work at a young age, helping his parents raise livestock like pigs and horses. He was known as a true cowboy, often seen donning his cowboy hat and boots, while off-road riding with his father was one of his favorite pastimes. As a teenager, Todd developed a passion for race cars. His parents gifted him a blue Mustang Cobra when he reached driving age, and it quickly became part of his identity. With his rugged charm and sporty car, Todd never struggled for female attention. His mother, Diana, often joked that he was a magnet for girls, who would leave notes on his car windshield asking him to call them. However, despite the attention, Todd's heart was captured by a young woman named Jania. Jania worked as a cashier at a local pharmacy. Having been through a brief and unhappy marriage that ended due to her ex-husband's infidelity, she was now a single mother to a little girl named Jessica. After her divorce, Jania hoped that her next relationship would be with someone who valued and cherished her. When she first met Todd, who had recently started working as a security guard at the pharmacy, she saw him as a ladies' man. However, after getting to know him, her perception changed. Todd wasn't the player she thought he was. He was kind, caring, and sincere, and he soon fell deeply in love with Jania. He also embraced her daughter, Jessica, treating her as his own. Their love story blossomed quickly, and in 1996, Todd and Jania got married. They expanded their family with two more daughters, Samantha and Sarah. Despite their busy lives, their relationship thrived, and Jania worked multiple jobs while dreaming of earning a degree in education. As Todd pursued his passion for vehicles by becoming a truck driver, Jania continued working toward her goal of becoming an educator. Her hard work paid off, and after starting as a school secretary, she eventually became the principal of Fairview Elementary School. Todd, who had spent over 15 years in the trucking industry, was proud of his wife's success, and their family enjoyed the stability her new position brought. By the summer of 2013, the family was living comfortably, able to afford luxurious vacations and provide a good life for their daughters. They had just returned from an unforgettable trip to San Francisco and Las Vegas, which Samantha and Sarah described as the best summer of their lives. Sadly, this joyful time was soon overshadowed by tragedy. On the morning of August 25, 2013, at 9:27 a.m., the police received a call from workers at an almond grove located about 15 miles from Bakersfield. They had discovered a body. Emergency responders quickly identified the victim as 45-year-old Todd Chance, who still had his wallet and identification on him. His mobile phone was found nearby, and tire tracks indicated that a vehicle had been driven away from the scene. Todd had been shot twice in the chest at close range, and investigators believed one of the bullets had pierced his arm as he tried to defend himself. While Todd's wallet and phone were intact, his prized black 2011 Mustang was missing, leading detectives to initially suspect a carjacking. The investigation kicked off immediately, as authorities sought to piece together how Todd had ended up in such a remote location and why someone would have taken his life. In 2013, residents of a local neighborhood in Bakersfield, California, were puzzled when they saw a sleek black Mustang abandoned in an area notorious for gang activity and illegal drug trade. It seemed out of place for such an expensive car to be left in a district known for high crime rates. Concerned, they reported it to the police, and investigators quickly arrived at the scene. The car was unlocked, and the keys were lying on the floor. Detectives also discovered a revolver with 2 spent casings inside, making them suspect it was the murder weapon. Yet, leaving the gun in the car of the victim, Todd Chance, struck them as unusual. A closer forensic investigation revealed fingerprints and DNA inside the Mustang that belonged to Todd's wife, Jania Chance. Her prints were found on the driver's side door and gear shift, which could be explained by her being his spouse and likely using the car at times. However, it raised questions for the detectives, especially since their initial theory of a carjacking didn't align with the evidence. Why would someone steal a car, kill its owner, and then leave it unlocked with the keys inside? The more investigators uncovered, the more the situation suggested this wasn't a random act, but rather a deliberate attack. Todd cherished his Mustang. It was like a fourth child to him, a symbol of pride and joy. He would never have left it in such a suspicious area by choice. The evidence began to suggest that someone had intentionally left the vehicle in this remote spot to confuse the investigation. The coroner's report further complicated matters, indicating that Todd's death was a calculated execution. He had been shot twice at close range, and either bullet wound could have been fatal. Todd likely died within minutes of the attack, and his body was dumped later at the almond grove where it was discovered. Adding another layer to the mystery, Todd's shoes were completely clean, despite the dusty terrain of the almond grove where his body was found. If he had walked there, his sneakers would have been dusty, which strongly suggested he had been killed elsewhere and brought to the grove afterward. Later that day, the police arrived at the Chance family home to deliver the devastating news of Todd's death. His wife was calm and composed, offering the detectives her full cooperation. She provided them with phone records, bank statements, and a timeline of events from the morning Todd left the house, telling her he was going to a gun show with his father. According to her, Todd left around 7:30 or 8 a.m., while she remained home working on her computer. Their 2 daughters, Samantha and Sarah, confirmed seeing their mother working on the laptop around 9:30 or 10 a.m. When asked to check Todd's gun safe, Jania discovered that his pistol was missing. She found it odd that Todd would have taken the gun, though she speculated he might have planned to trade or sell it at the gun show. The fact that a gun was found in the Mustang made it seem like Todd had been shot with his own weapon. However, when detectives spoke with Todd's father, Travis, a contradiction emerged. Travis denied any knowledge of a gun show and claimed he hadn't seen his son that day. They had no plans to meet up, which was entirely different from what Jania had told the police. This inconsistency raised new questions. Was Jania lying, or had Todd lied to his wife about his plans that morning? Investigators then turned their attention to the supposed gun show. It was real and did take place that morning, but it was located on the opposite side of Bakersfield, far from where Todd's body was found. This further discredited the story of Todd heading to the event. As detectives dug deeper into Todd's phone records, they stumbled upon an unexpected discovery: intimate photos of his ex-fiancée, Carrie Williams. Accompanying the images were flirtatious text messages exchanged between Todd and Carrie, discussing personal matters, including Todd's wife. This revelation shifted the focus of the investigation, as the text suggested Todd may have been rekindling a relationship with his former lover. Jania's calm demeanor during the police's initial visit and her inconsistent account of the events that morning now seemed more suspicious. Detectives theorized that Todd might have been planning to meet Carrie instead of going to the gun show, which could have triggered a jealous confrontation between him and his wife. The investigators began considering the possibility that Jania had discovered Todd's secret correspondence with Carrie and, in a fit of rage, killed her husband. Interestingly, Todd's relationship with Carrie predated his marriage to Jania. While they had broken up on bad terms and hadn't spoken for a long time, they reconnected in 2012, just a year before Todd's death. This newfound connection gave Jania a motive and cast her in a darker light, making her a prime suspect in her husband's murder. The police were initially unsure about Carrie Williams' potential involvement, so they arranged an interview to better understand her connection to Todd. Aside from the intimate photos and messages, Carrie provided a solid alibi. During the time of the crime, she was at a museum with her daughter. Her presence was verified by a parking ticket. Carrie explained that she and Todd had reconnected online after many years, exchanging messages and photos, but they hadn't met in person. With her alibi confirmed, Carrie was ruled out as a suspect. The detectives, still suspicious of Todd's wife, decided to avoid making accusations without concrete proof. Their persistence eventually paid off, as new, unsettling evidence came to light. They already had the victim's phone, gun, and car, but none had revealed foreign fingerprints or DNA. Determined, the police returned to the street where Todd's Mustang had been abandoned. This time, they canvassed the neighborhood, hoping a resident might have noticed something. Several witnesses reported seeing a woman near the car that morning, someone they didn't recognize. The woman, described as middle-aged, was wearing a baseball cap that concealed her hair and large sunglasses that covered most of her face. She exited the black Mustang and walked away. Detectives also identified a few surveillance cameras in the area, and upon reviewing the footage, they saw a figure matching the witness descriptions. The person had a red backpack and carried a plastic bag. There was initial confusion over the suspect's gender, but the video and witness reports confirmed the figure was a woman. The detectives traced her movements through additional surveillance footage. After leaving the Mustang, she entered a nearby fast food restaurant where she changed clothes and shoes in the restroom. In the plastic bag, officers noticed something resembling a container lid, possibly disinfectant wipes, which she likely used to clean the car. After the wardrobe change, the woman was seen near a waste container, making a motion as though discarding something. A camera captured her using a payphone to call a taxi shortly afterward. By tracking the footage, detectives noted the taxi dropped off a passenger at the Chance family home around 10 a.m. Earlier footage had shown Todd's black Mustang driving toward the almond grove at around 8 a.m., where his body was later found. The car was seen returning toward the city at about 8:30 a.m., and again near the area where it was abandoned at 8:57 a.m., right when Todd's body was discovered. Although the surveillance footage strongly suggested Jania was involved, The low quality of the video made it difficult to positively identify her. 4 days after Todd's death, police asked Jania to come to the station to retrieve her husband's car. She arrived with her father-in-law, Travis. The two were questioned separately and shown the surveillance footage. Travis couldn't identify the woman in the footage, stating that he didn't know anyone who would have needed to take Todd's car and abandon it. When Jania was questioned, she also claimed that she did not recognize the person in the video. However, when detectives pressed her further about the possibility that the woman was her, she refused to answer more questions and immediately requested a lawyer. At that point, the police arrested her on suspicion of murdering her husband. Her arrest shocked many who knew the family, splitting the community. Some believed she had killed Todd, while others thought the police had made a mistake. Her daughters were among those who stood by her, convinced of her innocence. While the community debated, detectives searched the Chance family home, confiscating all electronic devices to look for further evidence. However, it would take time to analyze everything. Despite the footage and evidence pointing toward Jania, the district attorney's office felt it wasn't enough to press charges. The poor quality of the footage and the lack of concrete evidence made it difficult to build a case that would hold up in court. After 5 days in custody, Jania was released, and to the surprise of many, she was even given her late husband's Mustang back. Though Jania was freed, she remained the prime suspect. The picture-perfect family, celebrating 17 years of marriage, with well-behaved children and having just returned from a vacation, was now in turmoil. No one had seen any major signs of trouble in their relationship, which only deepened the mystery. While the evidence seemed to point to Jania, proving her guilt in court was another matter entirely. The case, for the time being, stalled. However, the investigators refused to let the case go cold. Over the next several years, they worked tirelessly to gather additional evidence, determined to hold Jania accountable for what they believed was her role in Todd's murder. Eventually, they succeeded. During the Chance family's vacation in Las Vegas, they visited a crime-themed exhibition based on episodes from a well-known TV show in the U.S. At first glance, this visit seemed harmless. However, as the investigation into Todd's murder unfolded, detectives noted eerie similarities between the cases featured at the exhibition and the details of Todd's murder. One of the criminal cases showcased how a suspect used a payphone to avoid being tracked by their mobile phone. Another example involved a woman who killed her husband and then changed her clothes and shoes to avoid leaving microscopic blood evidence behind. Exactly what the perpetrator did in Todd's case, as seen in the surveillance footage. It appeared that Jania might have drawn inspiration from this exhibition on how to commit the crime and cover her tracks. But this wasn't the only incriminating information the police gathered. Her fingerprints were found on Todd's car, specifically on the driver's door and gear shift. When confronted, she insisted she had never driven the car because it had a manual transmission, raising suspicion about how her fingerprints ended up there. Investigators also unearthed surveillance footage from a few weeks before Todd's death, showing Jania in a supermarket asking a salesperson where she could find a payphone. This was odd since Jania had 2 mobile phones, leading the police to question why she needed a payphone. Furthermore, Jania's claim that she had been at home working on her computer the morning of the murder didn't hold up. Forensic analysis revealed that there was no activity on the family's computer until 11 a.m., meaning that she had plenty of time to carry out the crime. The detectives shared the surveillance footage with Todd and his wife's daughters. The eldest, Jessica, initially identified her mother in the footage, even recognizing a red backpack they had at home. However, she later retracted her statement, realizing it could implicate her mother. Sarah and Samantha, the younger daughters, insisted that their mother was home at the time, fully believing in their mother's innocence. Despite the daughters' unwavering support, detectives were convinced that Jania had a motive. One possibility was her discovery of Todd's affair with his ex-fiancée, Carrie. The second, more concrete motive was the $500,000 life insurance policy in Todd's name. As the primary breadwinner, Jania faced the potential of paying alimony if she and Todd divorced, making a separation less appealing. In the end, she managed to receive a large portion of the insurance payout, though Todd's parents, Travis and Diana, fought in court to secure funds for their granddaughters. After years of gathering evidence, 49-year-old Leslie Jania Chance was arrested and charged with Todd's murder in 2016. The trial, which began in December of that year, painted a chilling picture of the events on that fateful morning. Jania and Todd were seen leaving their home together, with Todd driving the car. At some point during the drive, Jania allegedly pulled a gun on him. Todd, attempting to defend himself, stretched out his hand, but the bullet pierced his palm and chest. Jenny then fired a second shot, killing him instantly. Afterward, she dragged Todd's body into the almond grove and drove away, abandoning the car in a rough neighborhood. She took precautions to wipe the car clean with disinfectant wipes, leaving behind the gun and the keys. However, her plan backfired when local residents promptly reported the abandoned Mustang to the police. Her lawyers tried to lean on the alibi provided by her daughters, but the fact that Jania herself had claimed the girls were asleep while she worked on the computer weakened their defense. The lack of activity on the computer until late morning further undermined her claims. During the trial, she maintained her innocence. She claimed to love her husband and denied knowing anything about his virtual affair with Carrie Williams. She also insisted that she didn't need Todd's life insurance money. In a surprising twist, she argued that she had poor eyesight and never wore contact lenses, suggesting that the woman seen in the surveillance footage couldn't have been her because she wouldn't have been able to see clearly with sunglasses on. However, the prosecution presented evidence that Jania had ordered contact lenses just a month before Todd's murder, exposing another lie. On January 31, 2020, the jury found Jania guilty of murdering her husband. The verdict shocked not only Jania, but also her family, especially her daughters, who had never believed their mother was capable of such a crime. In September 2020, she was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison, 25 years for the murder, and an additional 25 years for using a firearm in the commission of the crime. Despite the conviction, she continues to proclaim her innocence, giving interviews in which she asserts that she was wrongfully convicted. In January 2023, she appealed the verdict, but it was upheld. She won't be eligible for parole until 2041. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. In the city of Aurora, Colorado, Angela Craig was loved for her warm smile and dedication to her family. As a mother of 6, her life seemed perfect, especially with her husband James Craig by her side. But behind their happy appearance, there were dark secrets waiting to come out. Angela's sudden health problems set off a shocking investigation that revealed lies, betrayal, and a deadly plan created by the very person she trusted the most. Angela was born on April 15, 1975, in the bustling town of Dodge City, Kansas. She grew up as a beloved member of a large family with 10 children. Known for her wit, intelligence, and her ability to engage in captivating conversations, Angela was always the heart of any gathering. Her love for animals, despite her allergies, was evident throughout her life, and she also had a deep passion for reading and woodworking. As a student of interior design, Angela found beauty in creating and arranging living spaces. However, her most important priority was always her family. She maintained strong relationships with her siblings and was quick to offer a helping hand to friends and even strangers. Angela's passion for genealogy led her to become a family history consultant, where she helped people reconnect with distant relatives. She was also highly active in her church, serving as a choir director, teacher, and youth group leader. On December 18, 1999, Angela married James Craig, a man with dreams of becoming a doctor. In 2006, those dreams became a reality when James earned his doctorate in dental surgery from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. While at the university, James played a key role in establishing the International Dental Program, assisting foreign-born dentists in obtaining their licenses in the United States. By October 2006, James began practicing in Aurora, Colorado, and over the span of 23 years, Angela and James welcomed 6 children into their family. Despite the physical distance, Angela remained close with her siblings, especially her sister Toni, who lived in Utah. The two spoke on the phone daily and made time for many memorable trips together. With James's dental practice and Angela's deep involvement in the local community, the Craig family seemed happy and content. However, life took an unexpected turn on March 15, 2023, at 11 a.m. when Angela was rushed to the hospital suffering from a debilitating headache, dizziness, and nausea. James was by her side, providing support during the frightening ordeal. Despite the medical team's efforts, Angela's condition worsened by 2 p.m. when she suffered a severe seizure. Doctors acted quickly, placing her on life support as her concerned family sought answers. This was Angela's 3rd hospital visit in just 10 days, with recurring symptoms of headache, nausea, and dizziness, yet no clear cause had been identified. This time, however, her condition was far more serious, leaving the medical team puzzled. As Angela's condition deteriorated, 2 close friends, Ryan Redfern and his wife, arrived at the hospital. Ryan, a fellow dentist and James's longtime friend from their university days, was also a financial partner in James's dental practice. In 2021, when James faced financial challenges, Ryan stepped in to help save the practice. His wife, who held a doctorate in nursing, was aware of Angela's recent health struggles and wanted to offer support. Angela's symptoms had first appeared on March 5, 2023, after returning from a visit to her sister in Utah. Feeling unwell, she sought medical attention on March 6, but the doctors found nothing alarming, prescribing her standard medication and recommending rest. However, Angela's condition worsened, leading to another hospital visit on March 9th, raising concern among her friends. On March 9th, while Angela was hospitalized, Ryan's wife reached out to James, offering her help. James, though appreciative, assured her that they had things under control at the moment. The next day, March 10th, Ryan's wife followed up, checking in to see if there had been any progress in Angela's diagnosis and offering her assistance again. James, grateful for her concern, acknowledged how challenging the situation had been, marking the beginning of a critical chapter in Angela's health journey. James expressed his growing concern as the doctors had conducted numerous tests, including several blood draws. Thankfully, the regular blood tests came back normal, ruling out autoimmune disorders and diabetes. The main issue at the time seemed to be Angela's blood pressure. Over the course of 24 hours, she had been given 5 liters of IV fluids, but her blood pressure remained alarmingly low. Despite the medical interventions, Angela still felt quite unwell. The doctors decided to keep her in the hospital for another night, hoping that she could return home the following day. Over the next few days, Ryan's wife continued to check in on Angela's health, offering unwavering support. James shared that additional tests had been run, including an MRI due to a family history of brain tumors, as well as ultrasounds and CT scans of her head, chest, and abdomen. Surprisingly, all these tests came back normal, and there didn't seem to be any medical explanation for her declining health. Without clear answers, Angela was eventually allowed to go home, but a troubling question remained. If all the medical reports showed Angela was perfectly healthy, why was her condition deteriorating by the day? Unfortunately, on March 15, 2023, Angela's health took a sharp turn for the worse. This time, her symptoms were even more severe. She was struggling with extreme dizziness, nausea, and severe stomach pain. Unable to reach James, who was at his clinic, Angela called her brother for help. He rushed her to the hospital, where she was admitted around 11 a.m. Upon receiving the alarming news, James hurried to be by his wife's side. In the midst of this crisis, James contacted his partner's wife to share the distressing update and even sent her 2 photos of Angela in the hospital room. Surrounded by medical professionals, Angela suffered a stroke and became unresponsive. Deeply concerned, Ryan and his wife decided to visit the hospital. They sent James a message to let him know they were on their way to offer support during this uncertain time. While en route to the hospital, Ryan received a troubling call from Caitlin, a relatively new office manager at the place where James worked. Caitlin had noticed some odd occurrences that raised questions about Angela's health. She shared an incident that took place on March 6, 2023. Caitlin had been working late at the dental office when James unexpectedly showed up, despite not having any patients scheduled. What struck Caitlin as odd was that instead of heading to his own office, James went down the hall to use a computer in one of the exam rooms. This was unusual because James typically used his own computer in his office, and this deviation from his normal routine seemed strange. About 30 minutes after Caitlin left the office, she received a text message from James. In the message, James mentioned that he was expecting a personal package to be delivered to the office and asked Caitlin to ensure it was received. He emphasized that no one else should open it. On March 13, 2023, the package James had mentioned finally arrived. However, when Caitlin went to pick it up, she discovered that a colleague had already opened it. Remembering James's request for confidentiality, Caitlin resealed the package and handed it directly to James. While repackaging it, something unusual caught her eye: a hazardous material label. The label was affixed to a cylindrical container marked with the words potassium cyanide. Caitlin assumed the chemical might have some medical or dental use she wasn't familiar with, so she resealed the box and quickly gave it to James. Later that day, she noticed James leaving the office, clutching the cylindrical container wrapped in brown paper. Her suspicions deepened. Why was James taking potassium cyanide home? Curious, Caitlin turned to Google to investigate the uses of potassium cyanide. That's when she stumbled upon a shocking discovery. The symptoms of potassium cyanide poisoning closely resembled those Angela had been experiencing. As Angela's condition worsened, With symptoms like nausea, vomiting, and low blood pressure, Ryan arrived at the hospital, still in shock from what Caitlin had told him. He met up with his wife, and together they went to see Angela, who was now on life support. Without wasting any time, Ryan approached one of the nurses on duty, sharing his suspicion that Angela might have been poisoned by James with potassium cyanide. Though taken aback by the unexpected information, the nurse took the claim seriously and agreed to conduct a new round of tests on Angela. Aware of the gravity of the situation, the nurse also dialed 911 to alert the authorities. Meanwhile, James stepped outside to take a phone call, giving Ryan and his wife an opportunity to leave the hospital. However, their departure was interrupted by a frantic call from James, demanding to know why they had left and informing them that the hospital staff suspected he had poisoned his wife. Ryan didn't hold back. He was upfront with James, confronting him about the mysterious package delivered to the dental office and the unsettling contents. He directly asked James why he had ordered potassium cyanide. Backed into a corner, James finally admitted that he had indeed purchased the chemical, but he claimed that Angela had asked him to do so, never imagining she would use it. After the tense phone call, James texted Ryan, pleading with him not to share their conversation with anyone, especially the police. He expressed concern that Ryan's involvement would only harm his family further. James acknowledged Ryan's motivations but insisted that if Ryan had come to him directly, man to man, rather than involving others, they might have avoided the current chaos. His frustration and anger toward Ryan were palpable. Ryan, however, couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Angela's deteriorating health. He made a crucial decision and contacted the police, sharing everything he knew and urging them to investigate further. Later that night, well past midnight, the police arrived at the hospital to discuss Angela's dire condition. She remained on life support, with no brain activity. The next day, on March 16, 2023, investigators visited Caitlin, the office manager. That's when the truth began to unravel. Caitlin revealed that on the morning of March 6, 2023, before Angela's first hospital visit, James had prepared a pre-workout protein shake for her. He proudly mentioned it at the office, portraying himself as a caring husband. However, things took a sinister turn when Angela suddenly became dizzy, and from that moment on, her health rapidly declined. Caitlin didn't hold back, also discussing the suspicious package and her concerns about the potassium cyanide. She explained how this lethal chemical could produce the same symptoms Angela had been experiencing, and in some cases could be fatal. Ryan, who had joined the conversation at the dental clinic, added more to the story, shattering the image of the seemingly happy Craig family. He disclosed that in 2021, when James was facing financial troubles and the threat of bankruptcy, he had confided in Ryan about his marital problems. Shockingly, at that time, James had been contemplating divorce. Even more heartbreaking was James's later admission that Angela had contemplated ending her life in 2022 through an overdose, but James had intervened to save her. According to Ryan, James claimed that Angela's self-harming tendencies became more pronounced when he asked for a divorce in December 2022. Despite these serious issues, James never reported any of Angela's behavior to the authorities or sought professional help for her mental health. This pattern of secrecy and neglect raised serious questions about recent events. To get a clearer picture of Angela's mental state, the police interviewed the couple's 6 children. Surprisingly, they painted a different picture, describing their mother as happy and full of energy, with no signs of the troubling behavior James had mentioned. This contradiction only deepened the mystery and suggested that James might have been fabricating a story to explain Angela's worsening health. As suspicion mounted against James, the police launched a full investigation. They obtained search warrants for both the Craig residence and James's dental office. They also began reviewing James's phone records and text conversations with Angela, dating back to March 6, 2023, the day she first reported feeling unwell. The text messages from that day revealed a disturbing exchange. Angela expressed her appreciation for a coffee James had made for her, showing affection and optimism for the day. However, soon after, she mentioned feeling dizzy and off, prompting James to suggest she check her blood pressure. The conversation took a troubling turn when James referenced heavy medications and acknowledged his past concerns, hinting at a possible trigger for Angela. He voiced concern about her symptoms, comparing them to those of a stroke, and asked about any weakness she might have been experiencing. This unsettling exchange, combined with the other evidence, left investigators with more questions than answers. Following the unsettling exchange between James and Angela, where he continued asking about her symptoms and offering suggestions, a troubling level of awareness and concern over her condition became apparent. The investigation took a significant turn when the police decided to inspect James's computer. They uncovered 2 email accounts linked to him, along with a disturbing search history related to Angela's declining health, raising more suspicions about his involvement. In February, just a month before Angela was hospitalized, James had searched terms like, "How many grams of pure arsenic does it take to kill a human, and can arsenic be detected in an autopsy?" He had also looked up chemical suppliers in the city, all of which raised red flags during the investigation. One particularly damning piece of evidence was a purchase made by James on Amazon for a product labeled as 99.999% crystalline metalloid arsenic. The product description explicitly stated that ingesting this chemical could be fatal. Further probing into James's online activity revealed alarming YouTube videos he had watched. One video titled "Top 5 Undetectable Poisons That Don't Show Signs of Murder" provided instructions on how to create plant-based poisons. He also conducted 3 more searches related to homemade poison making, specifically from plants. As if that weren't disturbing enough, the investigators found another video detailing the effects of cyanide and arsenic poisoning, highlighting how difficult it is for doctors to detect these substances. The most incriminating piece of evidence came in the form of an order James placed for potassium cyanide. At this point, the puzzle pieces were coming together. It was becoming clear that James had been poisoning Angela all along. But why would someone poison his wife and the mother of his children? Was it related to his desire for a divorce? As investigators dug deeper, they interviewed friends and family members. Angela's sister provided critical insight. She revealed that only those closest to Angela knew the truth about her marriage with James, which was far from the loving facade they presented to the world. She disclosed that James had a history of extramarital affairs with multiple women. Even more shocking, James had confessed to Angela about his addiction to inappropriate online material since his teenage years. One particularly disturbing incident from 5 or 6 years earlier caught the attention of the police. The woman recalled Angela telling her that she feared James had deliberately drugged her. Angela suspected that James had drugged her in order to prevent her from intervening in his activities, shedding light on some of the strange text messages between the couple. However, police remained skeptical of James's explanation about drugging Angela, finding it unreasonable that he would resort to such extreme measures. She also shared that Angela had longed to escape her marriage, a sentiment she had expressed repeatedly over the past 16 years. Yet, every time Angela gathered the courage to leave, James would skillfully manipulate her into staying. Their marital issues extended beyond their personal relationship and into James's struggling dental practice. Further complicating the situation, James had tried his luck gambling in Las Vegas, losing over $2,000 despite being in $2 million of debt. To the police, it became clear that beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect marriage, the Craig household was rife with turmoil. The investigation uncovered even more damning evidence when they found emails detailing round-trip flights from two separate occasions. These tickets were reserved for Karen, an orthodontist based in Texas. The emails between Karen and James were far from professional. Their tone was intimate. Karen had filed for divorce in 2022 and had been in a relationship with James, something Angela knew nothing about. Digging deeper, investigators found that these flights were purchased on the same day arsenic was delivered to James's home. This suggested a calculated plan for James to be with Karen on March 16th. One of Karen's emails to James with the subject line, "See you soon," expressed her regret over the events happening in James's life that week. She apologized for not being a part of his world and for keeping her distance. As police gathered more evidence against James, hospital staff fought to save Angela. Tragically, on March 18th at 4:29 p.m., Angela was declared brain dead. She passed away without ever knowing the truth about what her husband had been plotting. Just hours after Angela was removed from life support, James was officially charged with first-degree premeditated murder. He didn't have much time to reflect on the charges because, on March 19th, he was arrested. A few days later, James found himself in a Colorado courtroom for his initial appearance. As the charges against him were read aloud, a mix of friends, family, and even some of James and Angela's children watched in shock. The disheveled 45-year-old man in an orange jumpsuit, handcuffed, was a far cry from the smiling blonde man seen in family photos. James Craig, already facing the grave charge of first-degree murder, was also hit with a second charge, tampering with physical evidence. The judge set James's bail at a staggering $10 million. His trial is set for December 2024. A week after Angela's death, new information emerged, revealing that she had not one, but 3 life insurance policies in her name. While it's not confirmed, this raised the chilling possibility that collecting those life insurance payouts might have been part of James's grim plan, along with his affair. Now, Angela's 6 children are left to grapple with the devastating reality of losing their mother while their father stands trial for her murder. Angela's children were her pride and joy, and following James's arrest, Angela's family stepped in to care for them. They made it clear that James's extended family should not be held responsible for his terrible actions. In Angela's obituary, her family and loved ones tried to capture the essence of her life beyond the tragedy of her untimely death. When Angela was declared brain dead, her family made the brave decision to donate her organs. While they couldn't save her, they found bittersweet comfort in knowing that her legacy lives on through the lives she helped save. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Teresa Martin was resting at her home in Chicago, Illinois. It was around 4 in the morning when her phone rang, the glow of the screen showing her daughter Kenika's name. Kenika, 19 years old, had gone out that night to celebrate her new job at a party held at the Crowne Plaza Chicago O'Hare Hotel. Feeling uneasy, Teresa answered the call, sensing that something wasn't right. Her instincts were confirmed when she didn't hear her daughter's voice on the other end, but instead, the nervous tone of one of Kenneka's friends. The friend asked if Kenneka had made it home. Teresa's heart skipped a beat. If Kenneka wasn't with her friends and hadn't returned home, where could she be? Overcome with worry, Teresa rushed to the hotel herself to search for her daughter. What had happened to Kenneka Jenkins? The truth would shock everyone. It all started on September 8, 2017, when Kenneka received the exciting news that she had secured a job at a nursing home. Eager to share her joy, she told her friends, who quickly convinced her that such news deserved a celebration. That evening, Kenneka borrowed her mother's car and left the house around 11:30 p.m. to attend a private party organized by her friends at the Crowne Plaza Chicago O'Hare Hotel near Rosemont, about a 50-minute drive from her home. The party was in room 126, and Kenneka arrived with her friends at 1:13 a.m. on Saturday. The atmosphere was lively, with loud music, alcohol, and a room filled with young people. Kenneka greeted her friends, who congratulated her on her new job. However, one of her friends sensed something wasn't quite right. Kenneka, who usually didn't drink alcohol, was swaying and acting strangely as she hugged her friends. Though the odd behavior stood out, no one made much of it since many were intoxicated. The night continued without incident, and Kenneka danced with her friends, refusing to partake in any of the drugs or marijuana being passed around. Still, her friends noticed that she didn't seem herself, behaving in a way that was very different from her usual lively demeanor. Normally, she loved to dance with passion, but that night, her movements were slow and unenthusiastic. She eventually sat down, her expression filled with sadness. As time passed, her friends decided it was time to leave. They left the room around 2:30 a.m., but as they were heading out, Kenneka stopped abruptly. She checked her pockets and realized she had left her phone in the room. Her friends went back to retrieve it, but when they returned, Kenneka was gone. The hotel hallway was eerily empty, dark and silent, like a scene from a horror movie. They searched everywhere, but it seemed as if Kenneka had vanished without a trace. Over an hour passed before they decided to call Teresa, Kenneka's mother, using her phone. They explained that they hadn't seen Kenneka since leaving the party, immediately sending Teresa into panic. Teresa contacted the hotel, but the staff seemed dismissive, assuming Kenneka was just another rebellious teen who would show up eventually. Desperate, Teresa arrived at the hotel around 5:30 a.m., only to face her first hurdle. The hotel refused to release surveillance footage without a formal police report. At 7:14 a.m., Teresa called the Rosemont Public Safety Department, but they advised her to wait a few more hours before filing a missing person report, suggesting that young people often return on their own. Frustrated and knowing something was terribly wrong, Teresa couldn't believe how lightly the situation was being handled. Hours went by with no sign of Kenneka. It wasn't until 12:46 p.m. on Saturday that her family were able to officially file a police report. Only then did hotel management notify their staff of Kenneca's disappearance, around 1:04 p.m. Teresa returned to the hotel by 6 p.m., determined not to waste any more time. They began knocking on every door in the hotel, asking guests if they had seen Kenneca. Their actions led a hotel employee to call 911 to stop the disturbance they were causing. Furious and desperate, Teresa was enraged that more effort was being put into keeping the guests calm rather than searching for her daughter. It took 4 more agonizing hours before police finally agreed to review the hotel's security footage. To everyone's shock, it appeared that Kenneca had never left the hotel. This raised many questions. If Kenneca hadn't slipped out unnoticed, she had to be somewhere inside the hotel. Footage from the common areas was reviewed, and finally, a disturbing image surfaced. Kenneca was seen at 3:20 a.m. walking near the reception, stumbling and swaying as if she were intoxicated. 5 minutes later, she was captured on camera wandering into the lower-level basement area and then toward the kitchen, where she disappeared from view. With this new information, authorities scoured the hotel, but no further clues surfaced. As the day wore on, the search seemed to lead nowhere until September 10th at 12:25 p.m., when a hotel employee made a horrifying discovery. Kenneca had been found inside a freezer, locked from the outside. She was lying face down, missing a shoe, with no apparent injuries aside from a small cut on her foot. Her family was devastated. They had imagined countless scenarios, but nothing as horrifying as this. The freezer, set at a temperature just above freezing, was located in an unused kitchen. It was unclear why the freezer had been operational, as the kitchen hadn't been in use. Despite the investigation, the security footage showed no one entering the freezer with Kenneca, and her family couldn't believe that she would have entered voluntarily. The mystery surrounding what truly happened that night would haunt everyone involved. The police began to dig into the final hours of Kenneca's life, focusing specifically on the party she attended. According to their report, the credit card used to book the hotel room for the party was fraudulent and linked to a criminal gang operating in the Chicago area. Despite rumors circulating about foul play involving dangerous individuals, authorities insisted there was no evidence to support these claims. What happened after the party remained unclear. Some witnesses claimed that Kenneca had left with unidentified individuals, while others said she went back to retrieve her phone from one of the hotel rooms. A month after her tragic death, the coroner's report concluded that Kenneca's death was accidental, caused by hypothermia due to the freezing temperatures in the hotel's walk-in freezer. Alcohol and a medication called topiramate were also found in her system. The combination of these substances may have amplified the effects of both, leading to hypothermia more quickly. Although topiramate is typically prescribed for epilepsy or migraines, Kenneca had never been prescribed this medication. There was also swelling in her brain, though this was not linked to the cause of her death. The police issued a statement confirming that while there were no signs of foul play, the investigation remained open. However, Kenneca's family refused to accept this conclusion, convinced that something more sinister had happened that night. They believed someone had harmed her, and they were frustrated by what they perceived as the police's reluctance to fully investigate the matter. The city of Chicago was shaken by the news of Kenneca's death. Protests were held outside the hotel where she was found, with many believing that hotel staff had failed to take her disappearance seriously and might even have been covering up what really happened. Online, theories about the case spread like wildfire. People questioned how Kenneca, who had barely been able to walk straight in the hotel hallway, could have had the strength to open the heavy freezer door. Further details from the forensic analysis only fueled speculation. Multiple bruises were found on Kenneca's body, raising questions about how she sustained them. If, as the official theory suggested, she had entered the freezer on her own, why was her body covered in bruises? Many people believe that Kenneca had fought for her life, trying to escape her fate in that cold, locked freezer. Adding to the mystery was a video Kenneca had posted earlier in the evening, showing her smiling and enjoying the night with a friend. Later, she posted a Facebook Live video from the party where she could be heard laughing and even jokingly saying, "Help me, help me." What started as harmless fun in the video turned into a chilling moment that would be viewed by over 4 million people, sparking a new theory on the internet. In the hours after her friends left her, the hotel security cameras captured Kenneca walking around with an unidentified group. She had told her friends she was heading to her car, but the footage showed her inside the hotel instead. Why had she lied? After this mysterious interaction, Kenneca disappeared from view for several hours, only to reappear on camera at 3:27 a.m., visibly disoriented and struggling to move. At that point, she could barely walk, relying on the walls and furniture to steady herself. Questions started swirling. Had she consumed something other than alcohol? Her friends and family knew Kenneca rarely drank, as she had a low tolerance for alcohol. Was she forced to drink, or had she been drugged without her knowledge? Another theory emerged, that one of the boys at the party had been infatuated with Kenneca, but she didn't reciprocate his feelings. This idea was strengthened by a live video recorded by one of her friends during the party. Some viewers claimed that if you looked closely, you could see Kenneca being assaulted by a group of boys on a bed in the background. According to this theory, the assault led to her death, and her body was placed in the freezer to cover up the crime. While no concrete evidence supported these claims, the mysterious and heartbreaking circumstances of Kenneca's death left many questions unanswered and fueled widespread debate about what truly happened that night. On social media, various theories emerged about what happened to Kenneca, including accusations against specific individuals. Among the rumors, some speculated that her friends had betrayed her for money, leading to an unfortunate series of events that ended in her death. It was even suggested that the hotel itself may have played a role in covering up the incident. Faced with these allegations, Kenneca's friends deactivated their Facebook pages due to the intense online backlash. One prevailing theory claimed that Kenneca had been lured to the party by a friend who had been paid to bring her, allowing others to take advantage of her while she was intoxicated. According to this rumor, the hotel's manager later kidnapped Kenneca and ended her life to harvest her organs for sale on the black market. This speculation was fueled by the fact that her body was found in a freezer, which was assumed to be used to preserve it. Additionally, surveillance footage from cameras near the freezer, which should have shown Kenneca entering, was reportedly malfunctioning. Adding to the suspicion, an organ donation center was located just 20 minutes from the hotel. Around the same time, the hotel was facing legal action from the family of a 23-year-old man whose body had been donated for medical research but was allegedly mishandled for profit. Though none of these theories were ever confirmed or taken seriously by authorities, many remained convinced that powerful and dangerous individuals were covering up the truth. Kenneca's mother shared her ongoing grief over losing her daughter, believing that someone was responsible for her death. Her family and friends criticized the police's initial response and filed a lawsuit against the hotel, a security company, and a restaurant, seeking over $50 million in compensation. The lawsuit claimed that neither hotel nor security staff reviewed the surveillance footage promptly, resulting in Kenneca's body being discovered 21 hours after she was last seen. The family argued that had the hotel monitored the security cameras properly, Kenneca's life might have been saved. The family's lawyer presented photos of the freezer door, arguing that it had been accidentally closed from the outside after Kenneca entered. He alleged that someone had noticed the open kitchen doors and shut them, unknowingly trapping Kenneca inside. This theory, however, contradicted the timeline laid out by the surveillance footage released by the Rosemont police, which showed that after Kenneca disappeared into the kitchen area, no one else entered the room until her body was discovered. So, the question remained, who had closed the freezer door? In response, the hotel released a statement saying, Kenneca Jenkins' death was a tragedy, but the lawsuit is without merit, and we will vigorously defend against it. The family's lawyer countered that the hotel had the means to secure the kitchen area, which had locked doors, and that if the illegal party had been shut down earlier and security footage reviewed thoroughly, Kenneca's death could have been prevented. Ultimately, in December 2023, 6 years after the incident, the lawsuit was settled for $10 million due to negligence. Of the settlement, around $3.5 million was allocated to cover the attorney's fees. More than $6,000 went toward funeral expenses, and Kenneca's mother, Teresa Martin, received $3.7 million. Other family members were awarded $1.2 million and $1.5 million, respectively. To this day, the circumstances surrounding Kenneca Jenkins's death remain unclear. Neither witnesses nor the hotel's security footage have provided enough information to definitively explain how she ended up in that freezer. Whether it was an accident, a desperate attempt to escape, or something more sinister, Kenneca's death continues to raise questions. Who were the unidentified individuals seen with her that night? Did they try to intoxicate her for their own purposes, or did she drink on her own? Why was there no footage of the freezer area where she died? In her intoxicated state, was she able to open the heavy freezer doors by herself, or did she mistake it for something else, like an elevator? For many, the theory of organ trafficking remains a plausible explanation, especially given the growing issue of organ trade in the United States. Until the police can definitively confirm what really happened, all we can do is continue to speculate. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. It was 7:53 in the morning on April 22, 2016, when the Pike County Sheriff's Office in southern Ohio, United States, received a chilling call. On the other end of the line, a man's voice trembled as he gasped for breath. He could barely speak, but managed to say there was blood everywhere. Struggling to stay composed, he eventually explained what he had found. Her brother-in-law and one of his cousins were gravely injured. Officers immediately headed to the place of the crime. As they were en route, a neighbor flagged them down, asking them to stop. He insisted they check 2 other nearby homes, suspecting that other family members might also be in danger. His instincts were correct. Meanwhile, the man discovered 2 more bodies in another family home. As officers made their way through 3 trailer homes, the toll rose to 7 victims, all shot in the head while they slept. By midday, the horrifying news continued. Another family member had been found dead. The only survivors were a 3-year-old boy, a 6-month-old baby, and a newborn just 4 days old. Additionally, a little girl named Sophia survived, as she had been with her father that night, perhaps shielded from the tragic events. The Roden family, a large and close-knit clan from Ohio, lived in the rural area of Pike County. The patriarch, Chris Roden Sr., had once been married to Dana Roden, and together they had 3 children, Frankie, Hannah Mae, and Chris Jr. By 2016, Chris Sr. and Dana had separated but continued living on the same property on Union Hill Road. Chris, then 40 years old, worked as a laborer at the family's Big Bear Lake complex and shared a trailer with his cousin, 38-year-old Gary. Dana, 37, was a nurse's aide at a rehab center and lived in a nearby trailer with her younger children, who were 19 and 16 at the time. Also living with them was Hannah's 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. Frankie, at 20 years old, had moved in with his fiancée, Hannah Gilley, to another trailer close by. He had a 3-year-old son named Bentley from a previous relationship and a 6-month-old baby with his fiancée. Frankie spent most of his time helping his father with work at the family complex. The family circle also included Kenneth, Chris's brother, who worked in Columbus but lived only 15 minutes away from the rest of the family. On April 18, 2016, the family welcomed Hannah's newborn daughter, though her father was unknown, with rumors pointing to a relative. Still, there was no confirmation. Hannah, who had a strained relationship with Jake Wagner, Sophia's father, decided to raise her newborn within the family, juggling her work as a nurse's aide while finishing high school. The extended Roden family had a close bond, including Bobby Jo Manley, Dana's sister. Out of work, Bobby had been hired by Chris to care for his animals, unaware that one day, during one of his routine visits, he would stumble upon something unimaginable. At 7:53 a.m. on April 22, 2016, Bobby entered Chris and Gary's trailer, as he did every day. Immediately, he sensed something was wrong. Inside, he found the 2 men lying in a pool of blood. Horrified, he called 911, struggling to speak, and directed them to his address. Acting on instinct, Bobby rushed to another family home. He knocked, but there was no response until Bentley, the young boy, appeared. Panicked, Bobby entered the house and was met with another heart-wrenching sight. On the bed lay the bodies of Frankie and his fiancée, while their 6-month-old baby, miraculously alive but covered in blood, lay nearby. As the police made their way to the scene, a neighbor intercepted them, urging them to check 2 additional locations, suspecting more tragedy. He was right. In a 3rd trailer, they discovered the bodies of Dana, Chris Jr., and Hannah, all lifeless. The only survivor was Hannah's days-old infant. News of the massacre spread like wildfire. A cousin of the Rodens frantically tried to confirm that Kenneth was safe. Sadly, Kenneth had also been shot. He called the authorities to report finding the final victim. By 1:26 p.m., the death toll was confirmed. Chris Sr., Dana, Frankie, Hannah, Chris Jr., Hannah Mae, Kenneth, and Gary had all been killed. The only survivors were the small children, whom the killers had left unharmed, including little Sophia, who was, by chance, at her father Jake's house that night. When investigators examined the bodies, they pieced together a chilling timeline. Chris Sr. had a defensive wound on his right arm, indicating that he was awake when the assailants entered. He had fought back but was gunned down by 9 bullets. Gary was shot 5 times. Dana had 5 wounds to her head and neck, with some shots fired even after she was already dead, showing the killer's brutality. Chris Jr. had been shot 4 times in the head while sleeping, just like Frankie. Hannah and Hannah Gilley were also executed with 2 shots each to the head. Kenneth, on the other hand, was killed with a single shot. All the victims had been shot multiple times at close range, the wounds concentrated in the same part of the body, with a total of 32 bullets fired. The killers had clearly used silencers, as no neighbors heard any gunshots. Moreover, all the victims had their hands covered with plastic bags, and some bore further marks of brutality. One of the bodies showed evidence of 9 severe injuries. It became clear that this was a meticulously planned crime, meant to eliminate the entire family. At the crime scenes, investigators found 5 different types of shell casings, proving there was more than one shooter involved. Blood from the victims was everywhere, but no DNA from the killers was found. When detectives checked security cameras at the homes, they discovered they had been disconnected, with no traces of the attacker's DNA left behind. It was evident that whoever planned this crime did so with great care. Just as the case seemed to hit a dead end, investigators uncovered a new lead. In 3 of the 4 homes, they found marijuana grow operations, with one location containing over 200 plants. Quickly, they theorized that the Rodens may have been involved in drug trafficking, something not uncommon in Ohio. Perhaps the motive for the murders was a drug-related dispute. However, despite investigating potential connections to cartels or drug dealers, they found no conclusive evidence. Authorities considered the possibility of a family dispute over money, possibly linked to drug sales, but this line of investigation led nowhere. They also found cockfighting cages in one of the 4 trailers, but illegal cockfights didn't seem to be the motive for the killings. Investigators were about to leave, frustrated with the lack of evidence when a key piece of testimony emerged. Dana's father told detectives that the killers had to be known to the family, as the dogs hadn't attacked them. This, combined with the fact that there were no signs of forced entry at any of the homes, narrowed the investigation's scope. The police declared that the murders were cold-blooded and that the killers were still at large and armed. They urged the remaining Roden family members to seek safety. 30 investigators fanned out across the state, combing every road and home, and questioning anyone connected to the family in hopes of uncovering clues. Panic spread throughout Pike County, and a local businessman named Jeff Robbie offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to the killers. Neighbors hung a sign on Christopher's barn door reading, "Do you know who killed us on April 22, 2016? By January 2017, the investigation yielded its first results, though indirectly. A Roden cousin was arrested for drug trafficking. However, the authorities had already determined that the amount of marijuana found at the crime scenes was not enough to suggest a cartel was involved. Months passed with little progress, despite over 550 interviews, 1,100 tips, and the analysis of 700 pieces of evidence. On April 13, 2017, authorities delivered a grim update, admitting that they still didn't have enough evidence to make any arrests. Nevertheless, the prosecutor assured the public that there were leads they couldn't yet disclose. A year after the massacre, a memorial service was held, attended by various officials. The Pike County killings remained a topic of conversation, but 2 years after the tragedy, only the local community seemed to care. The media, the sheriff's office, and the prosecutor were noticeably absent from the second memorial service. It seemed that the largest criminal investigation in the county's history was fading into obscurity, until June, when a major break in the case occurred. The prosecutor announced for the first time that the investigation was focused on the Wagner family, who were connected to Hannah through her ex-partner. The suspects were George Wagner father, his wife Angela Wagner, both 47, and their two sons, George, 27, and Edward Jake, 26. The Wagners had lived just 20 miles from the crime scenes. However, by then, the family had moved to Kenai, a small town in Alaska. With them was Sophia, Hannah's surviving daughter, now under Jake's custody after her mother's death. The Wagners claimed that they had moved away because of the immense grief caused by the Roden family's deaths. The prosecutor called for any information about the Wagners, but the family didn't remain hidden for long. Financial struggles forced them to return to Ohio. As preparations were made to arrest them, investigators began to piece together how the relationship between the two families had turned deadly. Jake Wagner met Hannah Roden when he was 18, and she was just 13 during their time in high school. They went to prom together and became inseparable, which also brought their families closer. When Hannah was 15, she became pregnant with Sophia. Shortly after Sophia's birth, Jake asked Hannah to move in with him and his family, believing it would be a healthier environment for their daughter. Hannah refused, feeling it was an attempt to control her. From that point on, things deteriorated. Both Jake and Hannah wanted full custody of Sophia, and their families were locked in a bitter struggle. At one point, Jake even proposed that Hannah sign a document granting shared custody. When she refused, Jake began to threaten her, sending texts claiming that, if necessary, he would take Sophia by force. He tried to manipulate her, saying that if she truly loved their daughter, she would know Sophia belonged with him. Jake also expressed fears in these messages that the Roden family could harm Sophia. These tense exchanges continued for 2 years, with Hannah repeatedly refusing to live with the Wagners. In March 2015, Hannah ended her relationship with Jake, calling him abusive in texts, where she revealed he had hurt her and she was tired of being pursued. Violence seemed ingrained in the Wagner family, as George the son had obtained full custody of his child by threatening the mother with weapons. The situation escalated further when Hannah announced she was expecting another baby. Though she denied Jake was the father, he wasn't entirely sure, as they had briefly reconciled. This reignited a new custody dispute. In December 2015, Angela Wagner hacked into Hannah's social media accounts and discovered a message that infuriated the Wagner family. In the message, Hannah had told George the son's ex-mother-in-law that the Wagners would have to kill her before she gave up custody of Sophia. A week before the murders, the Wagners made one last attempt to convince Hannah to grant Jake full custody of Sophia. Again, Hannah refused. At this point, Rita, Jake's maternal grandmother, forged a document to try to make this happen legally. Tensions peaked when George the father and Christopher Sr. had a heated argument over where Sophia should live, completely fracturing the relationship between the two families. It was then that the Wagners began planning the murders. By Christmas 2016, the Wagner family held a vote. They were deciding whether to kill the Roden family to gain custody of Sophia. The vote was unanimous. Everyone agreed. For 8 months, the Wagner family meticulously planned the massacre. They studied the Roden family's routine in detail, when they went to sleep, their daily schedules, and the layout of their homes. They even researched the family's security devices. At one point, they visited the rodent property and fired guns into the air to see how far the sound would travel, realizing it was too loud and could expose them. George Wagner father decided the best option was to buy parts to create homemade silencers. Meanwhile, Angela Wagner purchased new sneakers for her husband and sons to wear on the night of the murders and instructed them to destroy the shoes afterward. She also obtained phone jammers to secretly disable the victims' devices, preventing them from calling for help. To avoid recognition, George father acquired a truck to use during the killings. On the night of the massacre, Angela stayed home with Sophia, as it was her night to have custody. This provided them with a perfect alibi. George father then went to Christopher's house, pretending to involve him in a fake drug deal. Unaware of what was coming, Christopher let him in. Authorities later discovered evidence linking Angela to the crime. She had purchased sneakers just weeks before the murders, and the tread matched a bloody footprint found at one of the crime scenes. They also confirmed that Angela had hacked into her ex-daughter-in-law's accounts. When investigators inspected the Wagners' electronic devices, they found numerous searches related to parental custody, highlighting their obsession with controlling Sophia. There was also evidence of financial disputes between the two families, including a $3,000 argument over a car purchase. While Angela appeared to be the mastermind, authorities were certain that Jake led the executions and that the entire Wagner family was involved. On November 13, 2018, authorities arrested 6 people. The first 4 were George Wagner father, Angela, George's son, and Jake. They were charged by a Pike County grand jury with 22 crimes, including 8 counts of aggravated murder. They all pleaded not guilty. Jake was also charged with unlawful conduct for his relationship with Hannah, as he was 20 when she was 15. That same day, 2 others were arrested for perjury and obstruction of justice. Angela's mother, Rita, 65, and George's mother, Frederica Wagner, 76. Frederica was accused of lying about purchasing bulletproof vests for her son. Neither woman was imprisoned, but Frederica was fitted with a GPS monitor. Authorities publicly revealed the motive: the long-standing custody battle over Sophia. After years of uncertainty, all that remained was to await the trial. In June 2019, records showed that Frederica had purchased the vests after the murders, leading to the charges against her being dropped. Rita wasn't as fortunate. A handwriting analysis in 2019 proved she had falsified a custody document for Sophia, leading to her entering a plea deal with the prosecution to avoid prison. The rest of the Wagners remained in jail, refusing to cooperate. They expressed sadness over the deaths of the Roden family and claimed they wanted the real killers to be brought to justice. For a time, it seemed the case might never close, leaving the people of Ohio unsettled. Then, 2 years later, something unexpected happened. On April 22, 2021, the 5th anniversary of the massacre, Jake Wagner struck a deal with prosecutors. In exchange for sparing his family from the death penalty, Jake confessed to personally killing 5 of the 8 victims and pleaded guilty to 23 criminal charges. 8 were for aggravated murder, while the others included conspiracy, aggravated robbery, tampering with evidence, and unlawful conduct with a minor. Jake admitted that he felt he had to kill Hannah to gain custody of Sophia, and once he made that decision, he believed he had to eliminate the rest of the Roden family to avoid retaliation. He expressed deep remorse for his actions. Jake was sentenced to 8 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. After his trial, he agreed to cooperate with the prosecution in their cases against his parents and brother. Thanks to his testimony, investigators located the truck George the son had purchased specifically for the crime, as well as 3 firearms the Wagners had attempted to dismantle and burn. These weapons had been buried in concrete behind the family's pond. A specialist was able to reconstruct the fragments, confirming that the shell casings matched those found at the Roden homes. On September 10, 2021, Angela Wagner pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit aggravated murder, robbery, and tampering with evidence. In exchange for her testimony against the remaining accused, the prosecution dropped the aggravated murder charges. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Only George father and George son were left to face trial. On August 28, 2022, George Wagner's son's trial began. The prosecutor called George's ex-partner to testify, revealing she had distanced herself from the family out of fear for her life. The prosecution argued that George had been complicit in planning, executing, and covering up the murders. George, however, denied having any knowledge of the crimes before or after they occurred, stating that if his family had asked him to participate, he would never have agreed. After 3 months, George was found guilty on all 22 counts, including 8 counts of aggravated murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 111 years for firearms charges. George father still awaits his trial. If convicted on the same 22 charges, he will face the same fate as his son. Despite the convictions, he continues to claim his innocence. The surviving children were placed in the care of distant relatives. For privacy reasons, their exact whereabouts are undisclosed, but it is known that they are safe and happy. The Wagner family's goal had been to gain custody of Sophia, claiming they could care for her better. Instead, they deprived her of her mother, her uncles, and her grandparents. The hope now is that she grows up far from her father's family, in an environment where violence is never seen as a solution. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. On a quiet April night in the small town of Michigan, an eerie stillness filled the air. A lone gas station, its lights casting unsettling shadows, became the backdrop for an unexplainable disappearance. Inside, everything seemed untouched. The cash still in the register, a coat hanging in the back room, and just a single drop of blood near the door. Yet, the employee who had been there only moments before had vanished without a trace. As the investigation unfolded, it became evident that this wasn't just a simple missing person case, but the beginning of a dark and twisted story that would haunt the community for years to come. Jessica Hiringa, born on July 16, 1987, lived in Norton Shores, a town in Michigan. Raised in a modest family alongside her sister, Jessica became a mother at the age of 22, giving birth to a son with her longtime partner. By 2013, the couple was still together, living in a rented house, though their relationship was strained by financial hardships and frequent arguments. Jessica worked at a nearby Exxon gas station, situated close to Lake Michigan, where she was known for her warm and friendly demeanor as the station manager. Customers often praised her for her kindness, and despite the challenges she faced, Jessica was determined to provide a better life for her son, taking on extra shifts to make ends meet. She had dreams of studying accounting at university, but money was tight, and her boyfriend was unable to fully support their family. As a result, their plans for marriage were repeatedly postponed. On the night of April 26, 2013, Jessica was on her usual shift at the gas station. Her day had started with a quick shopping trip around 3 p.m., followed by her arrival at work around 4:35 p.m. She parked her car and began her evening shift, which was set to end at 11:30 p.m. That night, she was the only employee on duty. At 11:14 p.m., a customer dialed 911 to report something unusual. He had entered the gas station to pay for gas in cash but found no one at the counter. He told the dispatcher, "I'm not sure what's going on, but there's no one here. The door is open, the lights are still on, but there's no one to take my payment. Only my car and another vehicle are outside. Why is no one here? It feels strange." Within 10 minutes, the police arrived at the scene. They searched both inside and outside the gas station but found no signs of a struggle. Everything appeared normal. Jessica's coat was in the back room, along with her purse containing $400, her car and house keys, and a single drop of blood was found near the door. Another drop was later discovered near the back storage area, identified as Jessica's. The cash register was untouched, with all the money still inside. The last recorded transaction had been for a lighter at 10:52 p.m. The gas station lacked interior security cameras. Near the register was Jessica's pack of cigarettes, suggesting she had only stepped away briefly, intending to return. Her car, parked outside and locked, remained where she had left it, but Jessica herself had mysteriously disappeared. Upon discovering the abandoned station, the police contacted the gas station's owner, who in turn called another manager living nearby to secure the premises. The authorities also notified Jessica's family of her disappearance. Her parents began calling friends in hopes of finding clues about her whereabouts. One friend remembered stopping by the station between 8 and 9 p.m., noticing nothing out of the ordinary. Later that evening, another employee arrived to close the station. She recalled that around 11 p.m., she and her husband had ridden past the station on a motorcycle. They noticed a silver Chrysler minivan parked near the service entrance, its back door open. Concerned that Jessica might be involved in a robbery, they paused to observe. The employee spotted a young man with messy, curly hair near the minivan, wearing an orange sweater. She watched as the man repeatedly opened and closed the van's back door before eventually driving away. When the police reviewed surveillance footage from nearby buildings, they found a video showing a silver Chrysler passing by the Exxon station at 11:02 p.m. A nearby store clerk also provided information to the police, mentioning that he had seen a man in the minivan speaking with Jessica. At first, he thought the man was merely flirting with her, given her attractive appearance. He observed Jessica standing outside while the man questioned why she wasn't inside. Both the store clerk and Jessica's co-worker, who had witnessed the man by the minivan, helped create a composite sketch of the unidentified individual. He was described as a young man, light-skinned with dark curly hair, stocky build, and standing about 6 feet tall. The sketch was released 3 days after Jessica's disappearance, but despite numerous calls to the police, no substantial leads emerged. The sheer number of silver Chrysler minivans in the U.S. posed a significant challenge for the investigation. In Michigan alone, there were about 15,000 registered vehicles of this kind, making it difficult to identify the specific driver connected to Jessica's disappearance. Initially, Jessica's boyfriend was a suspect. He admitted that they often argued but denied ever physically harming her. He fully cooperated with the investigation, telling police that he had been home with their 3-year-old son on the night Jessica disappeared. Without a car, he had no way of traveling to her workplace. After investigators checked phone records, they confirmed that he had been at home that night, ruling him out as a suspect. The investigation revealed that Jessica had many admirers, thanks to her friendly and outgoing personality, which sometimes led to misunderstandings. One such admirer was a married 37-year-old plumber. He visited Jessica at the gas station around 9:30 p.m. on the night she disappeared, confessing his love for her and even saying he was willing to divorce his wife for her. However, Jessica rejected his advances. He left the station, called his wife, and talked with her for about 50 minutes before heading home. After a polygraph test and interviews with his wife, he was also cleared as a suspect. Next, attention turned to the brother of the Exxon station manager. He mentioned that he had visited the gas station around 9 p.m. on the day of Jessica's disappearance. During his visit, he noticed that she seemed upset. When he asked her what was wrong, Jessica confided that she was experiencing family troubles. He offered her a place to stay, but she declined. After making a purchase and spending a short time at the station, he left for a night fishing trip at Lake Michigan. Detectives reviewed his phone records for that night, which confirmed that he had left the gas station and gone fishing, leading to his removal from the suspect list. Search and rescue operations for Jessica were launched, involving helicopters, trained dogs, and extensive searches of residential and commercial properties, woods, and Lake Michigan. Despite these thorough efforts, no clues were found, and the case hit a dead end. Nearly a year later, in February 2014, a similar incident occurred in Michigan. A petite, blonde woman with glasses was attacked by a man as she returned home late at night. She was kidnapped, taken to her apartment, and assaulted. Though her life was threatened, the attacker eventually released her after several hours. The perpetrator, identified as a 42-year-old man, was quickly tracked down but resisted arrest by brandishing a fake gun at the police, leading to his fatal shooting. He had a criminal history, including a kidnapping conviction in 2004 and an arrest in 2011 for indecent exposure. Notably, in 2014, he lived in a dormitory across from the Exxon gas station where Jessica worked. However, investigators found no evidence linking him to Jessica's disappearance. 2 years later, in 2016, another incident involving a young woman unfolded. After leaving a friend's party, she became disoriented on a dark street. A man in a silver minivan approached, asking if she was okay and offering her a ride, which she declined. However, when she asked to use his phone, he agreed, but only if she got into the van. Once inside, the man locked the doors, revealed that his phone was dead, and brandished a weapon, ordering her to stay quiet. He began driving, but the woman, feeling nauseous, asked him to roll down the window. Seizing the opportunity, she jumped out of the moving vehicle through the open window and fled to a nearby house. The man sped away. The woman immediately contacted the police and provided a description of her kidnapper. Using surveillance footage, the police traced the license plate of the silver Chrysler minivan and identified the driver as 46-year-old Jeffrey Willis. Willis, a factory worker, lived a quiet and modest life with no prior legal issues. When police located him, they searched his minivan and found a semi-automatic pistol. The weapon was traced to one of Willis's co-workers, who had reported the firearm missing along with its laser sight. Willis had stolen the gun some time earlier and was promptly arrested. A search of his home revealed a box filled with various BDSM items, including handcuffs, chains, ropes, gags, a vibrator, a video camera, and a bullet that matched the pistol. The box also contained insulin syringes filled with an unidentified liquid, sedatives, Viagra, lubricant, disposable gloves, and a diagram of the female anatomy with injection sites marked. On Willis's computer, authorities found disturbing videos showing staged kidnappings with young women as victims. A hidden hard drive in a ventilation duct contained footage he had secretly recorded of his neighbors swimming, unaware they were being filmed. A folder on the computer labeled Victims contained two subfolders, one named after Jessica Hiringa and another for a woman named Rebecca Blech, who had been murdered. Rebecca, a 36-year-old woman, had been tragically killed on June 29, 2014, roughly a year after Jessica's disappearance, in an area just 20 minutes from the Exxon station where Jessica had worked. Rebecca had gone for an evening run but never returned home. She was found by neighbors lying on the road, her clothing disheveled, initially leading authorities to believe she had been struck by a car. Though unconscious, Rebecca still had a pulse when she was discovered. Emergency services were called, but she succumbed to her injuries before they could save her. The autopsy report revealed that Rebecca died from 3 gunshot wounds to her back and head, along with multiple bruises on her wrists and legs. At the time of her death, her killer remained at large. However, 2 years after Jeffrey Willis's arrest, new evidence linked Rebecca's murder to the gun found in Willis's minivan. Willis denied any involvement, but prosecutors theorized that he had attempted to abduct Rebecca, and when she resisted, he shot and killed her. Forensic analysis later discovered Rebecca's DNA on a glove recovered from Willis's residence. Willis was convicted of Rebecca's murder and sentenced to life in prison. While serving his sentence, Willis faced additional charges related to the kidnapping of Jessica Hiringa. Despite his consistent denial, a review of Willis's phone records showed that on the night of Jessica's disappearance, he had been present at the Exxon gas station where she was last seen. Following that, Willis traveled to his late grandfather's house, located about 13 minutes from the station. When police arrived at the residence, they found the front door heavily secured. Forcing their way in, they discovered various cleaning supplies, powders, and bleach in the basement, all bearing manufacturing dates from early 2013, around the time of Jessica's disappearance. Willis's co-workers reported his unusual absence on April 27, 2013, the day after Jessica vanished. Uncharacteristically, he had failed to show up for his factory job. When Willis returned to work a few days later, he had deep, noticeable scratches on his face and hands, raising suspicions among those who knew him. A woman who had visited the gas station on April 25th, the day before Jessica disappeared, contacted the police. She mentioned arriving at the station late at night and expressing her concern for Jessica's safety, being there alone so late. Jessica acknowledged her worry with a nod, appearing anxious and somewhat frightened. At that moment, an unknown man inside the station remarked to the visitor, "Don't worry, she's got customers looking out for her." Shortly after, the man left. The concerned visitor, still uneasy about Jessica's safety, remained in her car outside until Jessica finished her shift and left. Tragically, Jessica disappeared the following day. In 2016, the witness positively identified Jeffrey Willis, recalling that she had seen him at the gas station. Investigators found that Willis had frequented the Exxon station, interacting with Jessica on at least 15 occasions. Simultaneously, Willis's cousin, Kevin Bloom, a 48-year-old prison guard, was detained after making inconsistent statements during questioning. His contradictions eventually led to a confession. Kevin revealed details about Rebecca's murder that had not been made public and admitted to helping Willis conceal Jessica's body. Kevin described how, on April 27th, the day after Jessica's abduction, Willis had invited him to a party at his late grandfather's house. Upon arriving, Kevin Bloom saw Jessica for the first time, lying unconscious on the floor, bound and gagged. The cousins wrapped her body in a sheet, transported it in a car to a wooded area where Willis had already dug a grave, and buried her. They then returned home. When Kevin led police to the forest to identify the burial site of Jessica, he spent considerable time wandering the area. Despite his efforts, he couldn't pinpoint the exact location of her grave. Even though Jessica's body was never found, alive or dead, Willis's trial proceeded. The prosecution presented substantial evidence to charge Willis with her kidnapping and murder, relying on the theory that Willis had been stalking Jessica for some time. On the night of April 26, 2013, he allegedly parked his vehicle near the service entrance of the gas station, entered the premises, and struck Jessica on the head with his gun. During the assault, the gun's laser sight cover fell off, and Jass's blood was left on the floor. Willis then dragged Jessica out through the service exit, placed her in the back seat of his car, and transported her to his late grandfather's house, where the most horrific acts took place. A forensic analysis of Willis's computers revealed that he had saved photos and news articles about the search for Jessica, tracking the progress of the investigation. Investigators also discovered that Willis had used a computer password consisting of Jessica's initials and the date April 27, 2013, believed to be the actual day of her death. Willis maintained his innocence, insisting he was at home on the night of Jessica's abduction. His defense team argued that the prosecution lacked direct evidence linking him to the crime, noting that no DNA belonging to Jessica was found in Willis's home or vehicle. As part of their strategy, Willis's defense pointed out that Jessica had developed a severe substance abuse problem before her disappearance, suggesting that her abduction could have been related to illegal drug activity. Despite these claims, Jeffrey Willis was convicted of the murder of Jessica Hiringa and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Throughout the trial, he showed no remorse or empathy. Kevin Bloom was found guilty of assisting in the disposal of Jessica's body. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison and 5 years of probation, and his employment within the prison system was terminated. A few years after his conviction, Willis became a suspect in another cold case. On October 17, 1996, in Fruitport, Michigan, Angela Marie Thornburg, a young woman, was found murdered, and her killer was never caught. Willis, who graduated from the same high school as Angela in 1988, was linked to her 1996 murder. At the time, Willis, then 28, was working as a janitor at his former school. Concerns arose when the school's principal noticed how much time Willis spent in the computer lab. Although the results of this investigation were never disclosed, Willis was immediately asked to resign from his position. As the investigation into Angela's murder continues, many details remain shrouded in secrecy. More than a decade after Jessica's disappearance, her remains have yet to be discovered. Following this tragedy, a custody battle ensued over Jessica's son between her sister and Jessica's partner. Ultimately, the child is being raised by Jessica's biological family. Additionally, Jessica's parents played a key role in advocating for legislative changes, which resulted in the passage of a law requiring night-shift gas stations to install surveillance cameras to prevent similar incidents from happening in the future. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. The sharp sound echoed through the dimly lit corridors of the apartment complex, unsettling those nearby. It wasn't a firework, but something far more ominous, a gunshot. Slowly, doors creaked open as curious faces peered into the hallway, confirming what many had suspected. A shot had indeed been fired. Outside the building, a different scene was unfolding. A crowd of about 100 people gathered, their eyes fixed on a modest window on the upper floors of apartment 24. The building itself was a drab, old structure, with nothing particularly notable about it, except for the unfolding drama inside. Reporters, passers-by, and even police officers were transfixed, phones and cameras aimed at the window, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Suddenly, the window swung open, and a soccer jersey was hung outside. Half of the crowd erupted into applause, showing their allegiance to the unseen person inside. There was a flicker of movement behind the window. Camera lenses zoomed in, breath held in anticipation. A figure emerged, but it wasn't who they expected. Instead of the man behind the chaos, a girl appeared. She looked about 15, giving a thumbs up as if to assure the crowd all was well. But her tear-streaked face and tense posture told another story entirely. She had clearly been crying for hours, and despite her brave gesture, fear radiated from her. A closer look revealed the horrifying truth. A gun was pointed at her back. Moments later, she disappeared, and another girl, also around 15, stepped into view, waving briefly before being pulled back inside. A hand holding a gun emerged next, firing a random shot into the crowd below. The gunman, a 22-year-old man, had been holding 4 teenagers hostage for 100 hours. This intense standoff became the longest hostage crisis in Brazil's history. As the country watched the situation unfold in real time, the police's handling of the event came under harsh scrutiny. The mistakes made by the São Paulo authorities would soon become as much a topic of discussion as the tragedy itself. That fateful Monday afternoon, 15-year-old Eloa and her best friend, Nayara Rodriguez, along with 2 classmates, gathered at Eloa's apartment to work on a geography project. The atmosphere was relaxed, filled with the usual chatter and laughter of teenagers. After a quick snack, Eloa began tidying up the apartment. Her parents and younger brother wouldn't be home until later in the evening, so she took a moment to clean up, folding clothes, making the bed, and washing the dishes. But the peace was shattered when the front door suddenly burst open. A man appeared in the doorway, standing there for several seconds, tense and silent, his eyes scanning the room. In his hand, he gripped a gun. The teenagers froze, unsure of what to do. Breaking the silence, the intruder announced that he had come to take Eloa's life, and the others had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. In a split second, he lunged at the 2 boys, striking them repeatedly with the gun. They were caught completely off guard, unable to process what was happening. Naira and the other teens sat paralyzed as the man turned to Eloa and began to savagely beat her. Nayara tried to scream for help, but a gunshot into the wall cut her short. It was a stark reminder that this man was not bluffing. His eyes bulged with rage as he brandished the gun like a toy. The first hour of any hostage situation is the most critical. During this time, the captor is overwhelmed by an adrenaline rush, a euphoric sense of power and control over their victims. In this state, reality blurs and the fear of consequences vanishes. For the captor, it feels like absolute power, an invincible high similar to surviving an earthquake or a near-death experience. But as the adrenaline fades, the captor is forced back to reality, and that's when things can become even more unpredictable. The moment of extreme tension had arrived. Shortness of breath, slight trembling, and heavy sweating were now setting in for the hostage-taker. His concentration was slipping, dropping by nearly 35%, and his brain was racing, trying to predict the actions of the hostages, police, and negotiators. Physically and mentally, the captor was deteriorating, and the smallest provocation could trigger a catastrophic outcome. In such situations, three key players are involved: the hostage-taker, the hostages, and the negotiator. For Eloa Pimentel's case, a specialized tactical unit was monitoring every development. Around 100 officers formed a tight perimeter around the building. The command center, set up at Eloa's school, focused on devising a strategy to save her and the other hostages. A rapid response team was on standby, prepared to infiltrate and disarm the hostage-taker if necessary, while snipers took their positions in nearby buildings, ready to react at a moment's notice. Now, they all waited for the captor, armed, dangerous, and likely struggling with mental instability, to make his demands. But this hostage crisis had an unusual fourth party: the media. The press broadcasted the entire standoff live, allowing the public to witness every moment unfold. As word spread, crowds of onlookers began gathering outside the apartment complex, their eyes fixed on the windows of apartment 24, where Eloa and her classmates were held captive. This was one of the first times an entire country followed a crime in real time. Reporters quickly discovered that the main hostage was 15-year-old Eloa Pimentel. They dug deeper, speaking to neighbors and acquaintances, soon learning that Eloa had recently broken up with a young man, Lindenberg Fernandez Alves, who wasn't willing to let her go. The press spun this into a narrative of unrequited love, with some even speculating that the two would soon reconcile and leave the apartment hand in hand. Talk of a wedding of the century flooded the airwaves. Astonishingly, reporters managed to contact Lindenberg by phone, broadcasting the conversation live on TV. He confirmed that Eloa was his ex-girlfriend and assured everyone that things would end well. However, inside apartment 24, things were far more dire. Victor, one of the teenage hostages, had told his father he'd be home by 5 that evening. When he didn't return on time, his father grew concerned and went to Eloa's apartment to check on him. After knocking several times without a response, the man heard strange sounds from inside. Panicking, he began pounding on the door, but a chilling voice warned that if he didn't stop, everyone inside would die. Terrified, the father rushed downstairs, searching for help. He soon found a patrol car in the courtyard and alerted the officers. One of them approached the apartment, but as he neared the door, shots rang out, narrowly missing him. The sound of gunfire startled the entire building, and soon residents were calling their friends and relatives, while the news of the hostage situation spread like wildfire. Eloa Pimentel was born on April 5, 1993, in Brazil. Known for her shy and modest nature, she was close to her family, especially her mother, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Her younger brother Douglas had introduced her to Lindenberg Fernandez Alves, a man 7 years older than her when she was just 13. At first, Eloa was flattered by the attention from an older guy, but as time passed, she realized they were complete opposites. While she was intelligent and diligent, he was aggressive and impulsive. Despite their differences, their relationship continued for nearly 3 years. Eloa's parents were against her dating an older man, but they couldn't force their teenage daughter to stop seeing him. Eventually, they allowed the relationship to continue, but only under strict supervision. Whenever Eloa went out with Alves, her younger brother Douglas had to accompany them. Over time, Alves became like part of the family, but his controlling behavior became more and more apparent. He forbade Eloa from seeing friends or going anywhere without him and constantly manipulated her emotions. While he lived by his own rules, partying every weekend, he held Eloa to a strict standard. He often made her feel guilty, claiming she broke his heart, only to beg for forgiveness the next day. The relationship was toxic, but Eloa didn't fully realize it until it was too late. One evening, she finally confided in her mother, telling her that she no longer wanted to be with anyone. This decision, however, would lead to the tragic events that followed. After breaking off her tumultuous relationship, Eloa made the decision to dedicate herself entirely to her studies. Her mother supported this shift, unaware of the nightmare that lay ahead. Despite their breakup, Lindenberg Fernandez Alves was convinced he could win Eloa back. His method? Stalking her wherever she went. He would silently trail her on his motorcycle as she walked home from school, never speaking, just watching. This unnerving behavior terrified Eloa. She began taking different routes home, zigzagging through alleyways and busy streets to lose him. But no matter where she went, she felt his eyes on her. Alves's obsession grew. He began calling Eloa's home, making threats to her mother, warning of desperate measures if Eloa didn't return to him. Her mother dismissed his words, assuming it was just another one of his dramatic outbursts. After all, Alves had always demanded attention, but Eloa was already living like a hostage, long before she was actually taken captive. One afternoon, while waiting at a bus stop, Eloa felt that familiar sense of being watched. She scanned the street but didn't spot Alves's motorcycle. However, across the road, she saw him standing there glaring at her. In a flash, he darted through traffic and stood right beside her. Alves pleaded, telling Eloa he'd made mistakes but still loved her. She tried to block him out, holding her textbooks close and praying for the bus to arrive quickly. Ignoring him only made things worse. His anger flared, and in an instant, Alves slapped her across the face, causing her books to scatter. It was the first time he had physically hurt her. Eloa ran home in tears, locking herself in her room. Her brother Douglas noticed her swollen face and suspected what had happened. Although she said nothing, Douglas felt responsible. After all, he had introduced Alves to his sister. Their parents, furious at the attack, called Alves and demanded an apology. Instead, he chillingly responded that he could do much worse if Eloa didn't change her mind. Now, armed with a gun and a bag full of ammunition, Alves had stormed into the apartment, taking Eloa and her 3 friends hostage. Eloa sat on the bed, side by side with her classmates. She tried, in a trembling voice, to calm Alves, telling him they could sort things out one-on-one. She even promised to come back to him if he would just stop this madness. But Alves wasn't listening. He screamed that he no longer wanted her back. His only goal now was to end her life. Grabbing shirts from the laundry, Alves tied up all his hostages, still unsure of his next move. His hatred extended to Nayara, Eloa's close friend, whom he believed had encouraged her to end their relationship. The boys, meanwhile, were simply unfortunate collateral, though their presence irked Alves. The police attempted their first contact with the hostage-taker. The goal was to establish dialogue, listen, and understand his demands. When the negotiator called apartment 24, Alves picked up the phone, and in the background, a scream could be heard. Alves was beating Eloa. When the police asked what he wanted, Alves chillingly replied that he planned to send Eloa to the afterlife and hung up. However, within minutes, the door to the apartment opened, and two of Eloa's classmates bolted down the stairs, escaping the building. Nayara had been trying to reason with Alves, pleading for him to let the boys go since they had nothing to do with his issues. Alves, seemingly irritated by the boys' presence, agreed and allowed them to leave. This was the police's first small victory, 2 hostages freed without negotiation. The boys later told police how Alves's mood swung violently, going from threats to kill everyone to moments of calm where he reassured them that everything would be fine. The tactical team quickly recognized that Alves was highly unstable, but his willingness to cooperate gave them hope for a peaceful resolution. With proper negotiation, there was a 93% chance of success in such cases. But then, disaster struck. A phone rang in apartment 24 and Alves answered, intrigued by how someone had gotten his number. The caller, however, wasn't the police. It was a reporter, live on television, who asked Alves several questions about Eloa. The journalist even asked to speak to Eloa, who, hungry and exhausted, broke down in tears on the phone. This unauthorized call threw off the police's carefully crafted strategy. It turned out the media had bribed acquaintances of Alves to get his number. They weren't concerned with ethics or safety. They wanted an exclusive. This wasn't the first time reporters had interfered, and it wouldn't be the last. With each call, they risked the lives of the hostages, but to them, the ratings were all that mattered. Alves, relishing the attention, spoke freely, telling reporters how much he had suffered and why he had resorted to such drastic measures. He assured them he would soon release Eloa and surrender. But as the hours dragged on, this promised ending never came. News outlets spun a story of an unfortunate young man, deeply in love, while the real tragedy inside apartment 24 continued to unfold. Viewers absorbed the narrative presented on their screens, sympathizing with the spurned lover who, they were told, had suffered a nervous breakdown. Eloa Pimentel, the true victim, was barely mentioned. Instead, the media focused on Alves, painting him as a heartbroken young man driven to desperate measures. The police, meanwhile, were perplexed by the public's response and hesitated to act decisively. Snipers were unwilling to take the shot, fearing the repercussions, and Alves grew more unstable by the hour. To prevent the hostage-taker from following media coverage of the police operation, which was being broadcast live, authorities cut off electricity to the building. The police urged reporters to stop live coverage and only air footage after the hostage situation was resolved, but the media refused. The situation spiraled into chaos. After 30 hours of captivity, Alves became increasingly agitated by the crowd outside. People gathered beneath the apartment, some shouting words of encouragement, others hurling insults. His patience frayed. Alves opened the window and fired into the crowd. Thankfully, no one was hurt. The power cut was part of a calculated tactic to wear down the captor, and it worked. Alves agreed to release another hostage, Nayara. Her family was waiting anxiously outside, and she was immediately taken to the hospital. Although Nayara had no serious physical injuries, she had endured unimaginable psychological trauma. For 6 hours, police debriefed the schoolgirl, who revealed the horrors inside the apartment. Alves had separated her and Eloa, binding their hands and blindfolding them. Throughout the day, Nayara could hear Alves beating Eloa, who cried and begged for mercy, only for Alves to switch moods and demand affection from her. Alves's erratic behavior was exacerbated by lack of sleep. He dozed off in brief spurts but always woke with renewed energy. His mood swings became more frequent and more dangerous. The next day, Nayara was awoken by her grandmother. The police had an unexpected request. They wanted her to return to the apartment. Despite the trauma she had endured, the police believed Nayara could help save Eloa. Her mother was horrified at the idea, but Nayara agreed, convinced that she could help her friend. Alves had asked for both Nayara and Eloa's younger brother Douglas to be brought to the apartment to act as human shields. The police complied, hoping to de-escalate the situation. Nayara approached the apartment while talking on the phone with Eloa and Alves. When she reached the door, it swung open. She saw Eloa, her face swollen and bruised. Before Nayara could react, Alves yanked her inside and slammed the door. Once again, Nayara found herself a hostage, and the entire country watched in horror as her family witnessed this live on television. The police had gambled with Nayara's life, and they had lost. Alves now had both girls back under his control. For nearly 100 hours, Eloa and Nayara endured relentless psychological and physical abuse. Alves' moods shifted between calm and violent outbursts. Eloa, exhausted and losing her grip on reality, still refused to yield to him. She had been controlled by Alves throughout their relationship, but now she resisted. At one point, she began throwing dishes, screaming at him to either shoot her or set her free. The outburst sent Alves into a panic. He feared the police would storm the apartment if they heard the commotion. In desperation, he put a gun to Nayara's head, threatening to kill her if Eloa didn't calm down. To prove his seriousness, he struck Nayara in the stomach. This was the first time he had physically harmed her. Eloa, now utterly drained, sat down in silence, unwilling to risk her friend's life. Then, Eloa's mother made a heart-wrenching call to Alves, begging him to release her daughter. She even offered to help them resume their relationship, but Alves was beyond reason. He coldly admitted that he no longer needed Eloa, understanding that he would be imprisoned as soon as this ordeal ended. Both girls overheard the conversation and realized they were in grave danger. A person with nothing left to lose rarely shows mercy. The following day, after Alves fired a shot into the wall separating his apartment from the police's command post, the tactical team decided it was time to act. At 6 p.m., they stormed the apartment. However, the operation did not go as planned. The door was barricaded with a coffee table, slowing down the officers by crucial seconds. In that time, Alves turned his gun on the two girls and opened fire. The police fired back with rubber bullets, intending to incapacitate him. But it was too late. Alves had already shot both girls. He was subdued and handcuffed as paramedics rushed to the scene. Eloa and Nayara were taken to the hospital, but it was clear that the damage had been done. Nayara had been shot in the face, with the bullet lodged in her jaw. Eloa had been shot twice. One bullet passed through her head, causing irreversible brain damage. She was placed in an artificial coma, but there was no hope of recovery. On October 18, 2008, at 11:30 p.m., Eloa Pimentel was pronounced dead. Her funeral was attended by tens of thousands of mourners. Her organs were donated, fulfilling her parents' belief that Eloa would have wanted to help others even in death. Nayara, after numerous surgeries, made a full recovery. Despite everything, she said that she would have gone back to the apartment again if it meant saving her friend. The tragedy sparked widespread outrage, especially over the mishandling of the case by the São Paulo police and the interference of the media. Several news channels were fined for obstructing the operation, prioritizing sensationalism over safety. In February 2012, Alves went to trial. He claimed that he had simply wanted to spend more time with Eloa, insisting that he never intended to kill her. The court found him guilty on 12 charges, sentencing him to 98 years and 10 months in prison. However, under Brazilian law, he would eventually be allowed to leave prison for work and temporary leave. The case of Eloa Pimentel remains one of Brazil's most infamous hostage crises, marked by missteps from nearly everyone involved. It's a haunting reminder of the catastrophic consequences that can arise when a situation is mishandled, leaving a nation grappling with the aftermath of a tragedy. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.